Hello, everyone. Continuing with the PPF, today we are going to talk about something about trade, comparative advantage, and absolute advantage. Right. So here is an example. You should be familiar with that, how to construct the PPF. Right. So suppose using the 12 work hours, Portugal can either produce 24 units of wine or 12 units of cloth. And using the 12 work hours, England can produce either 4 units of wine and 6 units of cloth. Right, so their production can be summarized into this table. So the maximum value of wine they can produce is 24, and maximum value for cloth is 12, and so on for England. Right? So now we want to construct their PPF. So as maybe you can remember, because here every people or every worker, they have the same productivity on both goods. So there's no difference in productivity among different workers. So we should expect that the PPF here is a straight line because their exchange rate is constant, right? So for straight line, we have a very simple mathematical expression for straight line. If you can remember, we can represent in the slope-intercept form, which is y equals to mx plus b. Here, m is the slope of our straight line, a linear form, right? It's calculated by the rise over the run, or the change in the vertical axis over the change in the horizontal axis. That's the slope. And the b is the intercept, which is the value of variable when it's crossed with its intercept. So b is a value when x of y, when x equals to 0. So for Portugal, we can draw its PPF like here. Right? The maximum value of y is 24 if it uses all the work hours to produce y. Similarly, the maximum value of clouds is 12 if it uses all the work hours to produce clouds. And because it's a linear form, we can just simply connect these 2 points to get the PPF. Right? So remember this linear form, how to calculate the mathematical expression for this PPF. Here, the m, or the slope, is change in the vertical axis, which is y, right? And the change in the horizontal axis, which is clouds. So going from this point to this point, the value of y changes from 24 to 0. So the change in y is 0 minus 24. Similarly, go from this point to this point. The value of clouds changes from 0 to 12. So the change of clouds is 12 minus 0. So we have the slope is -2. And the intercept is 24 because that's the intercept when clouds equal to 0. So that's the equation for the PPF. Y equals to -2 clouds plus 24. So this line means that if we want to increase clouds by 1 unit, y will be decreased by 2 units, right? That's the meaning of this -2. That is our interpretation of the opportunity cost. If we want to increase the production of 1 unit of cloth, we have to give up 2 units of one, right? So for opportunity cost, the 24 Y and 12 cloths, they are equalized in the resource term because they are using the same resource, same work hours to produce, right? So 1 Y should be equal to 0.5 cloths. That means the opportunity cost of 1 Y is 0.5 cloths, right? So which means if we want to produce 1 more unit of Y, we have to move people from clothes production to wine production, and the production of clothes is reduced by 0.5 unit. Similarly, we can get one cloth is equal to 2y. That's the opportunity cost of one cloth is 2y. That's for the Portugal, right? Similarly, for England, we can draw its PPF. Like here, you can pause the video and try to calculate the PPF equation for England by yourself. All right, so again, it's the linear form. Here, m is the slope, so it's the change in y over the change in clots. The change in y goes from 4 to 0, which is 0 minus 4. And the change in clots from this point to this point is going from 0 to 6. So the change is 6. So we can get the value for the slope, similarly the value for the intercept. So that is, we can get the PPF equation for England. Right? Similarly, we can calculate the opportunity cost for England. So we start from 4y equals to 6 clots. So we can get 1y is equal to 3 over 2 clots, which means the opportunity cost of 1y is 3 over 2 units of clots. Similarly, we can calculate the opportunity cost for clots. That's for England, right? So the opportunity costs, they are summarized into this table. So probably you can notice that the opportunity cost unit of y is just the inverse of the opportunity cost of clots, right? So for Portugal, the opportunity cost of y is 1 over 2 units of clots. The opportunity cost for clots is 2 units of y, so they are inverse. The same for England. Right. So if we have the opportunity cost and the productivity, we can define the absolute advantage and the comparative advantage. Firstly, let's talk about the absolute advantage. Absolute advantage means when a country or individual company, they can provide a good or service in the greater quantity for the same resource or cost, or the same quantity at a lower cost than its competitors. Then we say that this country will have an absolute advantage in this good. Right? So in this case, we can see that Portugal, they can produce more wine than England using the same work hours. Right? So using the same 12 work hours, Portugal can produce 24 units of wine, but England can only produce 4 units. So the same for cloths. Using the same work hours, Portugal can produce more clothes than England, right? So we can say here Portugal will have absolute advantage in both goods. However, the comparative advantage is defined by the opportunity cost. So we say a country has a comparative advantage at producing good when it has the lowest opportunity cost of producing that good. So we can say that we can see that Portugal will have comparative advantage in wine because they have a lower opportunity cost than England. Right? So for Portugal, the opportunity cost for wine is 1 over 2. For England, it's higher, right? But we can see that because it's inversed. So we can imagine for England, they must have the opportunity comparative advantage in the other good, which is cloths, right? So England, actually, they will have a comparative advantage over uh, Portugal in cloths production, right? So what's the implication about this absolute advantage and comparative advantage? So in this case, we say that England doesn't have any absolute advantage, right? So Portugal will dominate in both goods production. So does that mean that England cannot sell any good to Portugal because they cannot get any productivity advantage of Portugal? Actually, that's not true. So a country can still engage in trade even if it lacks an absolute advantage in any good, because when we're dealing with trade, comparative advantage matters. That's a very insightful argument. So that will explain why some countries with very, very low productivity in every good, they can still export some goods to more developed countries, right? So comparative advantage matters in trading. So comparative advantage suggests that countries will specialize in producing goods or services where they have a lower opportunity cost or where they have a comparative advantage. Why is that? So go back to our example from Portugal and England. Remember, England doesn't have any absolute absolute advantage, but they have comparative advantage in clouds, right? Because their opportunity cost for clouds is lower than Portugal. So imagine that uh, if England want to get into trade and export clouds, so basically they are exchanging for Y using clouds because they are selling clouds and buying Y, right? So imagine a case where England they are willing to exchange for one Y using one clouds. Why they are willing to do that? Because if they don't buy Y, instead they produce Y by itself. To produce one Y, the opportunity cost is 3/2 units of clouds, which means it has to give up 1.5 unit of clouds to produce, right? But if they going to trade, they only need to give up 1 unit of clouds. So they get better off in trading than just producing by itself. So in that case, England is willing to do the trade. Similar for Portugal, they are also willing to get one clause from England and in the cost of one Y, because instead, if Portugal produce that one unit clause by itself, the opportunity cost is 2 units of Y, so it has to give up 2 units of Y to get 1 unit of clause by producing. But in trading, they can have a lower cost to get this clause. So Portugal is also willing to do that. So England and Portugal are both willing to do that. We are good. We are good on deal on trading. So England is selling clouds while Portugal is selling Y, because here the comparative advantage matters, right? So that's our theory or our very simple case. How about the real world? So there are some empirical evidence supports this comparative advantage theory. So in this paper published in 2012, they calculate the relative productivity difference between sugarcane and wheat, right? So that's the comparative advantage. If with a darker color, which means the relative productivity of one good is higher. So they will have a comparative advantage in wheat, right? So our theory or model should suggest these kind of regions with darker colors, they should be exporting wheat because they have comparative advantage, right? So the data shows that they are actually doing that. So we can see the theory prediction and the actual data, they have a very positive correlation, which means our theory actually works. We can actually explain some facts in our world.